Hello, and welcome to Blockchain Bylines. My name's Nicolas Cary, co-founder and vice chairman of blockchain.com. For this episode, we're excited to host Bowen, Belmer, and David Johnston, contributors to Morpheus, a decentralized AI network in local inference with a purpose to incentivize a network of smart agents and decentralized AI applications. AI is on everybody's mind today, but the models most people are familiar with are corporate controlled. They're centralized. Morpheus aims to change that and are laying the foundation for a completely new era of AI. So if any of that sounds familiar with its origins with crypto, stay tuned. With that, we'd like to welcome Bowen and David. Thank you so much for joining us. A little fun fact, I think I've known David since at least 2013. We go way, way back. And so I'm really pumped to have you on the show today, and Bowen too, to meet you. We have a little tradition around here, though. We got to learn the origin story. How did you get into tech, to crypto, and then make your journey into AI? We'll start with you, David.
Sure. Good to see you, Nick. Yeah, I mean, for me, class of 2012, heard about Bitcoin from a friend, and he finished explaining that. I was like, wait, there's a non-governmental money that'll never be inflated by politicians and is controlled by math. Yeah, I'd like to take my green pieces of paper and switch for that, right? So I was pretty much all in, and then ended up speaking at the first Bitcoin conference the foundation put on in San Jose of 2013, ended up starting a lot of the early capital groups, BitAngels, the first fund to do sort of all of token thesis. I guess most people know me for writing the paper on decentralized applications. So October of 2013, I was like, hey guys, let's take those great things about Bitcoin and use them for other projects, right? It's got to be open source, peer-to-peer, a blockchain, and have its own token. So I think that was the real magic of Satoshi, was he figured out how the software could pay for its own hardware. And thus it made the platform truly independent and neutral, right? And so people started using that model. Ethereum adopted that language of decentralized applications, or dApps. And that's been my last 10 years ever since, is helping build the different layers of the ecosystem, from digital assets on Bitcoin to Ethereum L2s to the whole journey. So yeah, it's been a wild time.
And here we are with the next chapter for AI. So we'll get into that in a minute. Yeah. So Bowen, give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, sure. I guess if we're looking at in terms of classes, I would have been class of 2016 or 17.
Good vintage.
I was a student. Yeah, so a student at the time. I heard about Ethereum actually before Bitcoin, but when I really started to dive into what was being built, I just became obsessed with the idea of, kind of similar to what David said, free money, like freedom of money and what that really means for society at large. And then he started to look at Ethereum and other smart contract platforms as free internet or free ability to access application. Worked on mostly as a community contributor to a handful of different things. I make the joke a lot within the Morpheus community that I was kind of like a lurker and user of everything. I've probably used every early DeFi app there was kind of kept a low profile. When I first discovered the Morpheus projects in early 2024 and started to see the rise of AI and more importantly at that time, the regulatory environment that was coming along with it, I realized the importance of decentralized intelligence. And I think that if we look at the core tenets beyond the basic hierarchy of human needs, if we look at the core tenets of societal needs, we essentially have money or value, we have ability to do things, application, we have violence, and we have intelligence. Well, I would prefer to just abstract violence out of the equation altogether, which means that we have to have a decentralized ability to access all those other things, with intelligence being the piece that up until now, we hadn't really collectively found a way to do. And I believe that Morpheus brings that to really humanity at large.
Very cool. All right. Well, this takes us to sort of the main meat of our conversation today, which is a decentralized AI crash course. So let's scaffold this a little bit. Give us sort of a rundown of what decentralized AI means. What are the fundamental differences with centralized AI, and how might people that are dabbling into AI right now, using ChatGPT, using these other systems that have a lot of user state, what are they not getting that they should probably understand a little bit about how they're using these systems?
So I would start with the idea that I really want a personal AI that's owned and controlled by me. It goes back to not your keys, not your coins. Now it's not your keys, not your mind, right? And so when I read the Morpheus paper in September of 23, it's like, oh yeah, that's going to be really critical. I want to use my Web3 wallet and my private key to control my AI and my data and my intelligence going forward. At the time, this was like early, people were just starting to talk about agents. ChatGPT had just taken off and kind of gone mainstream with generative AI. So it was like looking forward a couple of years, like, oh, agents are going to end up doing most of my economic activity, just like they trade most of the stock market trades at this point, right? That's inevitably going to come to, this new agentic economy. Is like, okay, I really want that to be open source. I want it to be permissionless. I want it to reflect the same values as Bitcoin and crypto. And so that was really inspiring to me. And I was like, yeah, I got to go all in. And when I really kind of grokked it, I was like, oh, this isn't just like an ethical thing. The centralized AIs are going to be hobbled. They're going to be crippled. They can't take actions on my behalf because they don't have a wallet. It's 2025 and Google still does not have a Web3 wallet. Why is that? It's because if they did, they would be a financial intermediary, right? They would have to do KYC and AML and all these expensive regulatory things that they don't want to do. And so their AI just gives you information, right? It could tell you the 10 things to do, but it's not going to do them for you, right? Because it doesn't have access to an payment rail. It can't pay for anything, can't pay another agent. And so it's like, oh, Web3 agents, AI and crypto, this is going to be a really powerful combination. And I think the benefit to crypto is also mass adoption. AI is such an easy user interface. You just tell the machine what you want to do. You don't have to know how to use a smart contract or be technically sophisticated. You literally just, tell it, hey, I want to send some money, right? Hey, I want to do this thing. And you don't need the technical knowledge. That's how we go mainstream, right? I think that's how we get to 1 billion users. Just like I remember the early internet, people dismissed it. They're like, nobody will ever use it. It's too complicated. It's just for nerds.
Just for nerds talking about movies on the internet.
until the search engine showed up. And you didn't need to use a command line anymore. And you didn't need to type in IP addresses. You just said, oh, I want this kind of website. It magically took you there. And the internet now is for everybody, right? So I think we're at that same inflection point.
So you think it's a UI UX thing on top of everything else? So it's like a whole bunch of things converging at once.
100%. Like blockchain is going to be the back end and AI is going to be the front.
Okay. Very cool. I want to define a couple terms for our audience just because sometimes these vocabulary words can be a little not so cryptic potentially, but just a bit intimidating. So when we say agentic economy, what does that mean? And what do you think that looks like a few years from now?
Sure. So, an agent is an AI that acts on my behalf.
Okay.
Right. And what I really want is a super agent that is just my personal AI and it interacts with other agents on my behalf, right? There are going to be all these 200 IQ agents floating around trying to sell you stuff and, market to you. You're not going to be able to keep up with all of that, right? And so in this new agent-centric economy, this agentic economy, I need a super agent that reflects my desires, my values, connected to my wallet, and is representing me. So when I say, oh, I want to book this trip, it can go negotiate with 100 different agents for the best hotel and the best car and the best times and all of that, right? It might interact with 100 different agents on my behalf, but at the end of the day, I just want the trip booked.
Right. And it's working for you as opposed to a third party. So I think one of the things that's key is that crypto sort of pioneered this personal relationship with digital wealth instruments. And what you're describing is this personal relationship with access to intelligence and then capabilities for software to act on your behalf, but not on behalf of some third party. And I think this is something a lot of folks don't really get the grasp of yet. So let's talk a little bit about some of the concerns or arguably dangers of centralized AI. And I think a lot of the same arguments that can be made about how crypto represented an alternative to the traditional financial system, decentralized AI basically represents an alternative to centralized, highly controlled access to data, information that's censored, et cetera. But can you elaborate a bit on that? Because I know you're sort of like a pioneering voice in defending individuals' freedom, but also freedom to accessing information in a serious way that, you are treated like an adult in the interaction, basically.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. You can think about this as what did Web 2 give us, right? Because it was based on an advertising model, you're the product, right? They're selling your attention, right? They're selling your interests, right, to the highest bidder. And so I really don't want that model extended to this new AI future where they're going to be selling constantly my attention and mind to the highest bidder, right? I want to own my AI. And like you said, I want it aligned to me, not to some corporate, right? When you use Google, it's not aligned to you, it's aligned to making them money. So I want an AI that's maximizing my money, that's working for me. And so if you look at what Morpheus is doing, it's like, okay, I want to be in the driver's seat. I want my super agent to work on my behalf. In fact, I'm happy to give it my jobs if it's working for me, if I get the benefit, right? People are always afraid of, oh, AI is going to take the jobs. Well, one, it's not going to be AI, it's going to be somebody using an AI, right? And who is that somebody? It's either your company or government, or it's you. If you're the one in charge, AI is a wonderful thing. Now I'm getting a 5x, 10x multiplier on my intelligence, and I can get more done than ever before. But that's only true if you control the AI and have access to the benefits that it produces. So it's really a question of who is the AI aligned to? And I want it aligned to the individual. We've done a lot of economic experiments the last few centuries. Collective alignment has never worked. It doesn't work in economics, it doesn't work in technology. Everybody has individual preferences, and that's okay. Like, let them have their individual preferences. And so I think that's the key, is to push down control to the base layer, to the individual, and spread it out, that power, as much as possible. And so as every new model gets released, it's not like there's some company, hoarding that knowledge. Right now, the open source models are winning, right? If you've seen Llama and DeepSeek, like, that's representative of the open source models have caught up and are now exceeding the capability of the proprietary ones. So we're getting into this cool situation where as soon as a new model comes out, everybody benefits. Everybody downloads it. Within a day, I'm using it on Venice and other cool tools, right, that are built on the Morpheus ecosystem. And so, like, that's really exciting. So we can flip this from, like, I'm afraid of AI and what's going to do to me, oh, wow, I can get the benefits of it directly.
I think that's great. Like, there's so many of these like futures with a dystopian, all powerful AI that is controlled by some mega corporation with a nefarious founder, for example. Or there's this more optimistic one where we all have our own agents and they are out there negotiating on our behalfs, performing economic activity with each other, and broadly expanding human intelligence and economic opportunity. And I think that's a really optimistic and positive future. It's built on principles that were really pioneered in Bitcoin and then also through decentralization and distribution. So, I think one of the things that's always tough is like, well, this all sounds like science fiction, but you guys are actually building on these things. And I know Bowen wanted to give us a run through today. So we want to see a little bit about what kind of traction is there. This will be a little bit more of a technical segment for our podcast today, but I think it's so relevant because it's not just pie in the sky stuff anymore. There's code to ground. There are people using these things. It's getting adopted. And so give us sort of a maybe an overview of that, Bowen, and we'd be really appreciative.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. The topic you just covered is one of my favorites. It is a thought experiment that I've played out many times with members of the community on the different ways that this can go. And it all ends with decentralization. And like you said, Skynet in every movie was not decentralized every single time.
Yeah.
So as we look at this, it's best if I share my screen.
Yeah, go for it.
Perfect.
Yeah. And while Bo's doing that, I can just sort of set it up. Again, I've introduced this concept of a super agent that's representing you to other agents. And the Morpheus super agent, this is an example of one of them, right? It looks like Bo's on more.org. And this is sort of how people can participate in the ecosystem. People are adding their own capital and compute. They're building on top of the ecosystem. There's actually over 100 subnets that have launched projects on top of Morpheus, right? Which is really amazing to see. You can see some of the top ones here, whether it's CoinCap. People have done everything from games, or I see Tales and Conquest. You could literally do a Dungeons and Dragons style game live on Twitter with your friends with the large language model as the dungeon master, right? So people are coming up with all these fun examples of public ways to use it. Venice, of course, is one of the most famous subnets in the Morpheus context. They've done an amazing job of creating an application. It's basically a private chat GPT for issuing images and text and creating code. So there's the whole ecosystem now. And the parallel that I would draw is Ethereum. What Ethereum was focused on was supporting smart contract builders. They weren't building the smart contracts themselves. They didn't create Uniswap and Compound. They created the EVM. They created consensus. They created fast block times. They built the infrastructure. That's what Morpheus is doing, but for smart agents. Morpheus is not building any agents. It's open for everybody to build whatever they want, but here's the coding tools you need. And here's the capital support your project. Here's the compute you need to run the models, right? So this is a really amazing example of a free market anybody can participate in and launch anything they want. That's totally permissionless.
So it's an invitation to come build. And these subnets are basically projects, products, software experiences for Web3 natives to basically travel and test things out, invest in things, play in games, and much more. So looking forward to seeing some of these use cases. These are exciting. So Bowen, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, so the one that we were going to show off is Free AI, which up until recently was referred to as my super agent. So everything's being transferred over to Free AI now with regard to that reference implementation. But basically what this is some core contributors within Morpheus who are building an implementation to show off what a super agent is and what it can do. So you go to freeai.xyz, that's how you'll end up here. I do have a session open. So if you were to hit try now and connect your wallet, you can get to an open session. And as you'll see, for people who maybe haven't used something like this before, the user interface is pretty friendly if you've used any other type of GPT type of front end platform. The idea here, though, is when you're using Free AI, you have the ability to essentially call to multiple agents at once based on the Morpheus agent registry. And so, like you guys just said, Morpheus as a project is not one thing. It is like a plethora of tools and different things that people can leverage to build whatever it is that they want ultimately. And one of the best things about the project is that it's agnostic to use case. And so if you have a good way of plugging in the capital code compute or some other aspect of the project into the thing you want to build, it's permissionless and you're able to go ahead and do that. I also noticed when you first introduced us, you introduced us strictly as community members or contributors, which is also true. If somebody else, everybody who's contributing is somebody who's choosing to contribute because they're believing in the vision. And so what we're showing here is what a front end might look like. And I'm just going to give an example of if I click into the data example that's given here and I say, what's the price of ETH? It's going to call to the agent that has that information, and it's going to pull that information in. Now, this is a pretty simple example, but technically speaking, anybody can publish any agent and register it on the agent registry if they want to. And then going forward, there's a reputation-based scoring system where your super agent, based on your intent, will find the agent that can execute on the task or information that you're asking for it, or the multitude of agents to do that. I guess a good way of thinking about it is it allows you to not just take in information in the way that like a web search large language model might, but take in that information and actually execute actions. And to me, this is like one of the chasms that this technology is going to cross for crypto, because let's be honest, crypto experience right now is not exactly user friendly. I mean, even people who've been in for a decade or more often struggle to interact with smart contracts and Web3 applications. Well, if you have agents executing on that for you, you don't really like now the skill gap or whatever you want to call it doesn't exist anymore.
Very cool. Yeah, even though we've been building for over a decade, I still find myself with brand new users having to stumble through some of the concepts in wallet designs. And I'm really excited about this leap here because I think when you can have almost a human type dialogue with an application, it just extrapolates all the complexities away. And there's still so many sort of elements in a transaction really that happen right now that require intervention and scanning and review and two-factor and all this other stuff. So I'm really excited about the leaps that we'll see specifically on the UI UX side. This is very cool.
Really, what the interesting thing is what this can do is literally anything that somebody builds an agent for and registers to the agent registry, which again is permissionless. So this is one of the key aspects of Morpheus and what's being built too that's important to note is you guys talked earlier about how everything that was software at one time became a website. Everything that was a website became an application. Well, everything that's an application should and probably will become an agent. And so one key difference, though, is if you look at app stores, like the most popular ones, Apple App Store being the obvious example, that is still permissioned. Anybody can make a web app or an application, but whether or not it'll get listed on the App Store is the question as to the terms of service of Apple. That's not how this works. You can make your own agent, register to the agent registry, and a front end like Free AI will allow you to access that on a permissionless basis. Now, there's some nuance to that because front ends should still have the ability, obviously, to choose what they do and don't show on their specific front end. But on chain and as it exists on the registry, you can access it without having that permission. And also own that data. If you're the agent builder, own that data if you're the end user. And that's really the superpower that this gives you.
One thing I want to double click on, I think was interesting. You guys talked about the concept of like a reputation for these things. Obviously, the internet has had its issues with scams and other things. Talk to us a little bit about how that reputation you imagine sort of developing over time, and just to give some confidence to our users and people that are experimenting with these things so that they can make sure if they're hiring an agent to do something for them, they know they're getting the right price. For example, if they're asking for, what the price of Ethereum is today.
So that's actually where the blockchain is critical, right? An AI can say anything. I'm the best agent for whatever, but how do you objectively know it's true? Is you look at the on-chain activity, right? So I wrote a paper in 23 about smart rank, and the idea is to look at the smart contract transactions. That's the lowest common denominators. Everything has a certain number of transactions, and those are hard to fake because it costs money and gas to do a transaction. You can look at that on-chain activity and say, oh, Lido's got 10 million transactions and $30 billion used by their platform. Yeah, I'm going to use that smart contract and not the one that was released yesterday and has one user. So that becomes super clear when you go beyond text and actually look at on-chain reputation.
Thank you for clarifying that. So the Morpheus white paper claims that everyone will have a powerful personal AI capable of thinking with them and taking actions to benefit them. So let's peer into the future a little bit. You've given us a couple examples of what this looks like today, but the speed at which these systems are being developed, especially by the open source community and embraced predominantly by native folks on the internet, what do you think this looks like in a few years? What will we be able to do?
So I wrote an article recently called Moore's Law, M-O-R.
Perfect.
M-O-R, Moore's Law, because what we see is something very similar to traditional Moore's Law, where the length of a task an agent can do has been doubling every 7 months. 2021, it could do a task for a few seconds. It could give you an answer to a basic question. Fast forward to 2023, I can search the internet for you. It can work on something for a few minutes. But today, an agent can work for like an hour uninterrupted and do a task like building an app or building a website pretty reliably. And so we're going up this curve and it's exponentiating where I'm going to set off my agent on a task and it can go for 4 hours, for 8 hours worth of human work, come back to me an hour later with an outcome. And I can say, great, now do this.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what we're headed towards. And that's what a super agent really is. It's like a delegator. It's like a coordinator. I'm expressing what I want to do to my super agent. And then it's able to go and use that information to go access a bunch of other agents to get the more and more complex tasks done. So that's literally what I want to do. I want to set up a bunch of recurring jobs where it's like, go read all of my email and give me a report. Go read every crypto website I care about and give me a report. Check all of my socials, right? And tell me who I should be replying to. Like all those things I want to do, but I don't have time to do. If only I had unlimited intelligence to work on my behalf. Like that's what really gets me excited, is that idea of these recurring jobs that I can set up that my agent does for me. And then I can shift to, well, what do I want to accomplish? And how do I want to do it? And less of the manual labor of entering a bunch of data or, going and do things myself, right? So that's, I think, where we're headed very quickly. And that's not 10 years out. That's not 5 years out. We're talking like the next couple of years. And you're gonna be able to do that on Morpheus within the next few months. Go ahead, Bowen.
Whoa, okay, cool. That was gonna be my question. It's like, what's kind of like in the near term time horizon then?
Yeah, I was going to say, humans are famously bad at anticipating exponential growth. And so what feels like 10 years is probably more like 1 or 2. So this is similar to David's, although I right now we look at this idea of a super agent, which I view as like your agentic self online. We view it as kind of a companion to you. I think
Yeah.
what happened is you will just view it as you. And so instead of you going on your device, having 30 applications, there's one app. It's you as an agentic representation online, which is in some way, shape, or form non-fungible, meaning that I can prove that it's me. There's a scarce number of me, unless if I want to replicate it. And basically, I'll go from device to device that I'm using, and my agentic expression or my super agent will just come with it. And it'll remember all the things I did. It'll forget the things I wanted to. It'll learn the things I wanted to. And it will probably do things that I didn't even ask it to do because it's anticipating what I'm going to want. And I think we will create systems that kind of know us better than us in a way, which is weird to think about. But I do think that's where we're headed.
That's so interesting. Anticipating probably what I'm going to order on the internet for dinner tonight or something else, right?
Sure.
Based on
Yeah.
history.
Your grocery
Indian
cart,
food
your grocery
every
cart
Monday.
will be, yeah. Instead of you going online to like order your groceries, it'll make your grocery cart and you'll just add or remove things, that type of thing.
Got it.
Or let me give a practical work example. I have friends that I work with in Asia and Europe, but I have to sleep at some point. I can't be awake 24/7. I really wish I had a super agent that could respond to them while I'm sleeping, right? It has access to my information. It knows what I would say in response, or, oh, I need you to look at this GitHub issue or whatever, instead of waiting for the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. If I've given it the permission, like, yeah, I work with this guy all the time. I trust him with all this information. If he asks for X, do Y, like that's about to unlock. And I think that's the really cool thing is we can get away. We're sort of trapped in this 24-hour cycle right now that we are not built for. And
Yeah.
people get burned out working weekends and nights just trying to keep up with all this information. If I can shift into a mode where I'm not bottlenecked by the amount of intelligence, but instead it's about agency that I express, like this is what I want to do, and my agent's gonna go and do it. Like that's a really cool world that we're stepping into, and hopefully will solve this information overload that we've been in for the last 10 or 20 years.
So I've just thought of a new title for the next thing you're going to have to write, David, and it's just more is more. Okay. And that'll be a perfect title for the next article. Okay. So you guys have invited contributors to this community. What are some of the next things that sort of need to get developed to move us up that curve faster? And what would be some great contributions you could imagine from developers or organizations to contribute to the Morpheus community?
I would say just launch a subnet. It's permissionless. Anyone can create one. And then people in the community can stake towards your open source project. That's what we really want. Just like Ethereum gave that for builders of smart contracts. We want to do the same thing for smart agent builders, is give them all the support they need to succeed. So if you have a product or a community, here's a way that you can join and get the support you need, whether it's the capital or the compute. So just go to more.org, MOR.org, and you'll see sort of all the ways you can participate. And it's worth saying, Morpheus is very much like Bitcoin. There's no founder, there's no company, there's no foundation, not even a DAO, right? It's a purely open source project that anybody can build on. And I think that's important. It means it's cross-chain. It means it's use case agnostic. You don't need anybody's permission to build what you want to build. And I think that's really critical because a lot of projects are like, oh, only on this chain, or only in this context, and only for these people, or only if you're friends with the founder and he says it's okay. There's none of that in Morpheus. People show up and they create what they want to create, and things move so much faster there.
I want to talk now, I guess, about like the Morpheus tokenomics. There's a more token. You guys, can you walk us through how that does work, though? Because I think it'd be great for people to understand how they could benefit by contributing and what that sort of looks like.
Sure. It's simple in the sense that there is a cap of 42 million that will ever exist. It was totally fair launch. So there's no pre-mine, there's no VCs, there's no unlocks for team or something like that. So people showed up February 8th and they staked Ethereum. and say, hey, I want to donate the yield to the project, right? That was a really clever mechanism because it means you don't need a treasury. There's nobody holding anybody else's money. It's entirely self-custody. So somebody can show up with their staked ETH and say, yeah, I want to stake towards the project. They withdraw their staked ETH. They have the same number of ETH they started with. And so that's really an amazing sort of reimagining of the ICO model, minus the rug factor, minus the risk factor. Like people can just show up. And so over $2 billion have gone through the project.
Wow.
Of people staking Ethereum. And that's resulted in over $7 million of yield coming in. And what happens with that yield? It buys tokens out of the Uniswap pool and it locks them up and it burns others, and some are left in for liquidity. So again, you had no treasury. There's nobody taking that money and paying their friend. It's literally all going into the community and creating liquidity for everybody earning the token. So that's one bucket. Okay, 24% of the emissions go to people providing capital, but 24% go to builders creating these subnets and smart agents on top of the platform, and 24% go to those providing compute. We actually need to run the models, and who gets paid to do that? And then finally, people creating the reference implementation, the code reward. So it's got these different buckets that basically support the entire tech stack, from funding something to running it on compute to building a subnet to creating all the coding tools. And so we go back to Satoshi. How does the software pay for its own hardware? In the Morpheus context, that's these emissions go to all the real contributors in the network. So it's still early days. It's like a 16-year emissions curve. And it takes some of those burned tokens and they come back as a block reward at the end of the 16 years. So it like refreshes every 16 years. I think it goes out for 256 years. So it's a long-term project, but that's what I love because it gives you the ability to contribute to the project for years and you're never too late. It's like if you found Bitcoin in 2012, you were still early, right? And it's because it had that long emissions curve and allowed it to build a really big community.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to add is the compute function, because if you were asking about how people can get involved today, so my kind of narrow focus just personally right now is trying to help drive the demand and supply economics behind the compute contract. And I just wanted to click on really quick how that works. So anybody who's listening to this that maybe is a consumer of compute currently for the thing that they're building can understand some of the benefits. On top of all of the self-custody benefits, there's massive economic benefits as well. So without going too in the weeds, one of the great things that Morpheus put out into the world is this idea of staking for inference. So right now, if I were to use something like Llama 3 to run my project and I'm paying for it in US dollars on whatever platform is hosting it, that is direct spend. That's all a liability. I'm not getting that money back. You're effectively renting that inference. Well, the way that the Morpheus protocol works is if I'm somebody that wants to consume compute, I can stake my More tokens to the compute contract and I will receive a pro rata share of available inference based on how many compute providers there are on the other side. And there's a whole tokenomic system that goes behind this. And I definitely implore people to either reach out, I'd love to talk to you about it, or point you to the resources. But this idea is I'm actually staking my More tokens, and now I essentially own that portion of the available inference, and I still own those underlying More tokens. And so in a neutral case where the token price stayed flat over a period of time, I've now completely gotten rid of my inference cost. In a scenario where the token price goes up, I can theoretically actually get paid for consuming inference. And on the other side, even if the price were to go down, let's say it went down, 50%, I still only spent half of what I would have otherwise on the cost of inference. And so even without the core principles, just the economics itself are really awesome. And I highly recommend that people check it out if they're building something and consuming inference.
Very cool. Definitely a novel concept. Morpheus adopted atomic governance model. Can you explain how that works, David?
Sure. So most people are familiar with like a DAO, right? Where everybody votes on every aspect of the project. I actually don't think that's the best kind of governance. To quote Jefferson, the DAO that governs the least governs the best. At least that's what he would have said, right?
He would have said that.
Yeah, he definitely would have said that. And so I think it's the same thing here. If you look at Bitcoin, how does Bitcoin governance really work? There are repo maintainers that are really deep experts in their area, and they propose a change. And if people want to accept the change, they download the software. I think that's actually the gold standard for governance. And so if you look what Morpheus has done, this idea of atomic governance is there are different repo maintainers. I'm the one for the smart contract, but there's a different guy for the smart agents repo and the compute router and all the different aspects of the project. That's effectively the guy that put in the most code and is really the expert in that area. And they're free to do whatever they want. If they want to upgrade it, if they want to accept new code, it's a free market for governance. And because it's all open source, if you don't like what they're doing, you can just fork the repo and use a different one, because Morpheus is entirely modular. It's a set of nodes for the compute, it's a set of smart contracts, but it's not a consensus mechanism, right? Everybody doesn't have to all do the same thing. If you just want to use the capital smart contracts, you can just use that modular piece of the system. And the same for the agent registry and the same for all the other parts, right? And so because it took this modular approach, you don't have to force people into, all right, we have to take a vote and only one way is the way. No, you can just have a marketplace and let everybody choose for themselves. But that concept and principle of individual choice permeates through the entire project. So there's no votes on which subnets to support. If you want to take your 10 Morpheus and stake it to that one project, great. They get that proportion more support from the protocol. So it's an individual choice for what you support and where you direct your compute and which code you use. Everything is modular. And I think that's actually the most powerful type of approach, because you get out of this collectivist type thinking as the only way that you can solve problems. No, if you give people individual choice, I think you have better outcomes. So it's a really novel approach that it's been refreshing after a lot of experiments with other systems.
Yeah. And I think that coordinating voting and getting the proposals done and then like people fighting about the outcomes, it's just like, it creates this like tribalism that causes, I would say, worse outcomes in a lot of ways, interestingly. So that's pretty cool. Thank you for sharing that with us. One last question here to Bowen. If I'm working on something, how do projects actually get listed in one of these repos?
Yeah, great question. So it's totally permissionless to register yourself as a subnet. So there's two ways of looking at this. The first is just being registered as a subnet within the protocol. That piece, totally permissionless with regard to it being listed. It's essentially taking an Ethereum address, which right now the builder contracts live on top of Arbitrum and Base. So registering to the contract, making your name, deciding what you want the liquidity terms to be, meaning how long is stake locked up, because projects can decide that for themselves, and also what they're doing to attract people to stake to their project. Now, with regard to the front end, so dashboard.more.org, I get in touch with basically anybody who can help get you in touch with the maintainer of that repo on any of our social channels, whether that be Discord. I just wanted to draw that nuance because the dashboard itself is the front end that is maintained by somebody, which is technically permissionless in the sense that, you know, that's like an individual maintaining that website, as opposed to the actual registry, which is completely permissionless. And if you go to morlord.com, morlord.com, it's a great website built by another contributor in the community. I believe, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that lists just blanketly every registered subnet. I think it has no filters on it at all.
Got it. Very cool. Thank you so much. Okay, kind of to the end here. If our listeners could take away one thing from this podcast, what would you hope that is? And I'll start with you, David.
Owning your intelligence is going to be one of the most important things this decade. I mean, Eric Voorhees said it beautifully, that the importance of decentralized intelligence is approaching the importance of decentralized money. And if you know Eric, that's a powerful statement, right? So it's worth learning about this, just like it was worth learning about Bitcoin in 2012, right? For the same reasons. I'm a freedom maximalist, and I want more of these tools to exist in the world so that we can increase human freedom. And Bo said it well earlier. This is not necessarily for the person in the Western world that has 5 other options. This is for all the people that don't have another option. You know, something like 5 or 6 billion people have restricted access to money and intelligence. Those are the people that have adopted Bitcoin and crypto en masse. And it's going to be the same for these tools. So there has to be a true open source option. And Morpheus, for me, is that option and works with all these other parts of the ecosystem. So that's what I would say. Own your intelligence. It can't be more important. It's like the final boss. We need to get to that level of freedom to really sort of, get escape velocity beyond these old systems.
Well said. Bo?
I would echo a similar sentiment. It would be to come to understand that the principles around why we're building this, which for me, when I was early on in the Bitcoin days and in the Ethereum days, I at that point did not have a strong tech background. A lot of the people listening to this probably have forgotten more about technology than I knew at the time that I got involved in all of this stuff. But by understanding the core principles, it helps to understand, like, why is this being built? Okay, now let me back into how it actually works. And just harking back to the idea of free money, free application, and free intelligence. I can't stress enough how important that is, especially like David just said, when you need it, not just when you want it.
Amazing. Well, thank you both for spending some time with us today. I think having a strong couple advocates in the world fighting for decentralized access to the world's intelligence that isn't censored, that doesn't have a paywall behind it, that isn't trying to consolidate all the knowledge about you so that it can sell you more garbage on the internet is so important. And the more that people learn about these things, it seems obvious they'll want to have more control over their data so that they can interact as an adult and a free thinking individual with all these tools. And so I appreciate your advocacy and everything you do for this. All right, well, we'll leave it at that. Visit more.org to follow this. Please remember to subscribe to our channel and leave a review if you enjoyed today's episode. Until next time, I'm Nick Cary on behalf of the entire Blockchain.com team. Thank you for tuning in.